I'm happy to welcome everyone, but especially a number of Talmidim and Talmidot who came from afar. I think all of whom surprised Rabbi Brovender by coming from America, England, Moscow. I think that really says something, and that little extra that those people made to come, and that all of us did to be here on what I know will be a very special evening. I know is very much appreciated by Rabbi and Mrs. Brovender and by all of us. I'm especially pleased to welcome Mrs. Shoshana Summer, Rabbi Brovender's sister, who came in and surprised me. Mrs. Summer, of course, was so influential in the very early years of the yeshiva in helping run the American side and the American office. And I know that she and her husband, Rabbi Summer, who couldn't be here, but asked that we send this message to Rabbi Brovender. A message, a blessing from Rabbi Mordechai Summer, his brother-in-law. We're so glad that all of you are here. Before dinner, we'll have a chance to hear from Rabbi Brovender. And now, I'd like to call upon Dr. Rabbi Zornberg.
Good evening. I was given the impossible task of introducing Rabbi Brovender. I think this must be an unnecessary speech that was ever commanded. What I want to do then is to take 2 minutes just to take the opportunity to express my gratitude to Rabbi Brovender on many levels. There is the general level, the institutional level, the fact that my first job in teaching Torah was at Brovender's, as it was known in those days. That later, of course, I taught at later evolutions of Brovender's. But what I really wanted to mention very briefly is the effect that Rabbi Brovender's teaching had on me. I have to say that when I first heard Rabbi Brovender, I came into the Brovender world by marriage. I married Eric, who was part of this world. I started going to hear Rabbi Brovender occasionally, and he had an extraordinary effect on me, I have to say. There's something about the way he taught Torah that convinced me that it's possible to be this kind of person and to bring that kind of mind and to come up with things that are really original, that are really unpredictable. And that's inspired me in a certain way. I wasn't yet intent on teaching Torah. I was in a different direction. But the sense that there is a possibility of being really creative in the teaching of Torah, that did something for me. And I wanted to take this opportunity to express my gratitude on this issue. And my sense that all of us here are here to give honor, to give kavod to Rabbi Brovender. And my sense is that in spite of the institutional nature of the way the empire has developed, really what brings us all here, or many of us, is a spark of the kind that I'm talking about. That somewhere there is a sense for many of us that what had a profound effect on our lives is simply the teaching of Torah and the way in which we picked up something from that, and perhaps with other influences as well, proceeded to try to do something original in a different way. Olam chesed yibaneh, worlds are built by chesed. And chesed, I think, in the sense not only of kindness, but in the more basic sense of creativity. Chesed, God created the world, and with chesed, people create worlds. Intellectual worlds, social worlds, inner worlds. And it's that power to bring something out of nothing, to do something that hasn't been done before, that I think has a kind of encouraging and infectious effect. If someone does it, it encourages other people to do it. And for that, I'd like to represent as many people as feel that they are being represented in this, in giving thank you to Rabbi Brovender and very warm wishes for continued creativity in teaching and in inspiring other people. Thank you. Rabbi Brovender.
Thank you so much. But I would tell the story differently. But I think that's how it is. People tell the stories the way they see them. The way I saw the story was that Aviva never needed any help in content. But when she came to Israel, she was, for some reason, unsure, coming from someplace in Ireland. You know, whether she was the one who should be a teacher of Torah. I was quite certain that she could probably do a good job because I usually couldn't understand what she was saying. So once I locked her in a room with a bunch of students and said that when she finishes teaching the class, I'll open it up again. And that's my responsibility. I appreciate what you said. I think a lot of it is, as I say, perception. And I hope that at best, that I've managed to have a positive influence on some of you. I'd like to refer to the remarks that Jeff made. And when people keep asking me, how do I feel? Which is either because I don't look well, or because they've heard something about my medical history, or because they really don't know how you're supposed to feel at an event of this kind, so you can all look forward to doing something for 40 years, and then you'll know. So I'm trying to think of how do I feel. I feel like I feel like a bar mitzvah boy. Because bar mitzvah boys, at least let's say I remember my own bar mitzvah vaguely. I mean, it was a long time ago. What I remember is I didn't really know what I was doing there. It seemed that there were a lot of my parents' friends, and then there was some kind of set program that I was supposed to participate in, blowing out the candles at some appropriate moment. And when it was all over, I wasn't sure exactly what the point was, but I do remember that during this evening, I was instructed to mention by name all of my relatives who had come from far away. And I did that. I mean, I had it on a piece of paper, and Sylvia and Uncle Max, and one came from here, one came from there. I didn't know these people because heretofore they had never come to visit me, and they expressed no interest in me in one way or the other. So I felt that making this grand announcement, which made my parents, Zikrono Livracha, very happy, somehow it vindicated my life to be able to say that my relatives had all come, and wasn't it a great thing? I really didn't know what I was saying. Today, I feel differently. I thank all the people who came, especially those who came from far away. I mean, Avi Weiss is here someplace, but if he wasn't here, I would say I love you more. I imagine that most people think of a 40-year anniversary at a job as the end of the road. And that the party that you might participate in is a kind of a good riddance party. Like, we just want to make sure that it's over. That's why we're all here together. What I'd like to do is to dedicate some of my remarks tonight in an attempt to prove that, at least for me in my mind, that's not the case. I hope that no one will be overly disappointed. First, I'd like to say a brief word of Torah. I was warned by several people that the last thing anybody wants to hear is a Dvar Torah. I'm not sure why. I was warned about this again and again. So, you know how Divrei Torah are? They're infinitely expandable. So I'm going to tell you a Dvar Torah. I hope it will take me 2 or 3 minutes. But this Shabbos, I'm going to be in Boston. And I expect to give the same Dvar Torah for 4 hours. So, if you don't like the Dvar Torah, you should at least feel relieved that you're not going to be in Boston this Shabbos. So this is the Dvar Torah, or at least a version of it. The dispute between Korach and Moshe Rabbeinu is a dispute that's clearly stated in the Torah. The subject of the dispute is clearly stated. Ki kol ha'eda kulam kedoshim u'esochom Hashem u'madua tisnas'u al kahal Hashem. Why? Korach said, aren't we all great? Aren't we all noble? Aren't we all holy? In English, holy always sounds hollow. But think of the sheep. That's what Korach said. And of course, we know that Korach was very severely punished. And this punishment is again referred to in a Mishnah Pirkei Avos. Kol machloket shi b'shem shamayim sofo iskay. An interesting philosophical note that there's such a thing as a machloket b'shem shamayim. What that means, we don't know. But the Mishnah says that a machloket l'shem shamayim is the machloket of Hillel and Shammai. We know Hillel and Shammai, they disagree often. That's a machloket l'shem shamayim. She'eino l'shem shamayim. What's a machloket she'eino l'shem shamayim that is not in the category of l'shem shamayim? So the Mishnah says, machloket Korach v'chol adoso. Machloket Korach v'chol adoso. Okay, they're the good guys. They're the bad guys. The good guys are l'shem shamayim, and the bad guys are not l'shem shamayim. I just want you to understand. I want to tell you what the Resisei Laila says about all of this. I can't go through it because I promised you 2 minutes, which I may, not honor. But that's how it is. That's how it is to speak. They speak, you say, I'm ending, and then they continue. Somehow, if you say you're ending, everybody feels a little better. It's like you sort of say, oh, he knows that I'm tired of this. So the Resisei Laila of Tzaddik says this. I'll paraphrase, I'll rephrase it. I will rephrase it, and then you can go check on it. And if you don't like the way I rephrase it, then you can say, I invented it. Rabbi Tzaddik said, it's not reasonable to think that the Torah would record a lie
that somehow Korach said something wrong. It's like when Miriam and Aaron spoke ill of Moshe Rabbeinu, the Torah didn't have to tell us exactly what they said. And that remained a kind of a mystery for us throughout the generations. What did they say? What was it that generated such anger against Aaron and Miriam? Here too. Why does the Torah tell us? Why does the Torah tell us? Madua tisnasu al kahal Hashem. Why does the Torah say that? So, the Risisei Lama says that this is a machloket. This is what a machlokas of Shem Shamayim is. There's a dispute. There's kind of difficulty that people have with each other about an idea. There's disagreement of the most profound sort in trying to understand what God may want of us at a particular time. But never does it turn into hatred. Hatred is a psul, is a defect that is not part of the creation. The Kabbalah said that it came with the nachash, with the snake, and with the hate of Arbaim. Hate, the hate that is engendered by a machlokas. That's what is not the Shem Shamayim. So I think that I'm finished. I always try to teach people that they can disagree with each other. And in fact, I feel that disagreeing is healthy, a good sign, a sign that you're thinking. If you don't think, you don't disagree. But the disagreement, that's what the Risisei Lama says, can't generate negative feelings and negative attitudes. And so Korach, the hate of Korach, it also was. It wasn't just that they had an argument, that they had a ta'anah against Moshe Rabbeinu, but they gathered together others who were willing to hate and find the situation unacceptable. I would like to thank a few people who have helped me during the years that I've tried to teach others Torah. Before I mention them specifically, I'd like to preface the following. When I came in Aliyah with my wife Miriam in 1965 is a long time ago. I mean, history books are written about the Six-Day War, right? I mean, it's a very popular topic today. And 1965 clearly was before 1967. Even if you haven't been in yeshiva for a long time, you would be able to figure that out. So I came to Israel in 1965. 1965 was a long time ago. I had no intention of having anything to do with yeshiva as my life path. My parents and mother were not in yeshiva. They came from Hasidic background. And I had no relatives who were yeshivas. I had no grandfather who was a Rosh Yeshiva. I had no yichus except for my wife, of course, but she's a Galiciana, which itself is difficult. But we got through that. I wanted to be an academic. I wanted to be an academic because I had heard that academics work 2 days a week, 6 hours a week, and 8 months a year. Coming from Brooklyn, I could not imagine a better deal. And I like books and I like to read books, and so I figured I would be an academic. When I came to, you have to understand that I've never studied in a real yeshiva. Real is with quotation marks. Real yeshiva. If you want to know what a real yeshiva is, you go out into the street, you wait for a guy to go by who's wearing a jacket and a hat, and you say to him, "What's a real yeshiva?" And he'll tell you right away. I did not go to a real yeshiva, I went to YU. But coming from Flatbush, I went to high school in
Flatbush. I thought it was as real as could be. I mean, I just couldn't imagine anything more real. But when I got to Israel, I discovered that I had never been a student in a real yeshiva. Since then, I have never attended a yeshiva as a student, except for one period of time when I went to the Mir to learn with my son. But I didn't eat lunch, which is one of the defining characteristics of a student in a yeshiva. And I didn't have a permanent seat, which is clear, is not such an easy thing to get, but, so I wasn't really a student at all the yeshiva. I didn't have a social group that I belonged to. So I used to learn with my son in the afternoon. That was very pleasant. And I went to the Mir because he was in the Mir, but I wasn't a student. So that I can't say that when I established the yeshiva finally, that I was affected by the years I had spent in yeshiva, because I haven't spent any years in yeshiva. Now, make no mistake. I don't mean to say that I was a Rabbi Soloveitchik shiur. There's no doubt that it had a great influence on me, but influence that I can measure or that I can think about. Influence that I had no way of measuring and thinking about. There's no doubt about that. And I certainly don't try to deny that at all. And there are also other aspects of the YU experience which are very positive and important to me, etc. All I'm saying is that experience was not the romantic yeshiva experience that I later learned to think about. Remember, I never had it. I was never in this romanticized yeshiva that I was able to think about. But, that's what I thought. I thought that the yeshiva was what people told me the yeshiva was, because I had never been really to a yeshiva. My attitude to women and Torah learning was entirely naive and not directed by intellectual considerations. What do I mean? It seemed to me that if the only thing you knew was Torah Shabbat Peh, let's say somebody learned in yeshiva for many years and then he wanted to be a teacher, so he should teach what he knows. I mean, if he was learning Torah Shabbat Peh, I guess that whoever's learning should be learning Torah Shabbat Peh as well. I was also, of course, fortified by the fact that Rabbi Soloveitchik taught his own children and then taught in Stern College, but to me it seemed not so much of a campaign as it was a reasonable thing to do. And I couldn't really understand why people who considered themselves more real than I was worried to get. But I didn't let that bother me too much, because after all, as you know, if you're not real, I mean, what difference does it make? So that's what I did. Back to the yeshiva, I became using this romantic notion that I had. I became a person of the Nefesh HaChaim. I became a believer. Now, I may have been the only yeshiva student in the world who had become a believer, but I was a believer in the position of the Nefesh HaChaim. The Torah provides the only stable base for religious experience in Yahweh. If you learn more, if you learn better, if you appreciate it more, then you daven better and do the mitzvot better. That was me. That's what I thought. I thought that learning Torah was important, not only because there's a mitzvah to learn Torah, but because somehow that learning Torah had universal application to a Jew. A Jew is a better Jew, better person, a better mitzvah doer if he learns Torah. I don't mean learning the Torah of the mitzvah. Just learning Torah. Just being in a conversation. Just having something to do with other people who are also learning Torah. That seemed to be how my romantic notion of the yeshiva kind of gelled into the yeshiva that I would have liked to create. I admit that this ideology doesn't always seem to work. And some people need a detour before they can get to the Torah in a serious way. But I think this is only a detour, and I was a person who had appreciation of detours. I mean, from time to time, you could find me in Modi'in. You could come into my house and find Shlomo Kavach sitting there holding court. I mean, I was a man of detours. I appreciated the detours, but I could not see the detour as being the final station. Eventually, you have to get back to the Greek Torah. The good of the Daf Yomi phenomenon, though I imagine it is a frustrating experience for most, I wrote here in parentheses, which I think means I shouldn't say, but I'll say it. Would you like to study material that you don't understand? In other areas, like would you like to go to a daily shiur in physics? Or do you know anything about physics? That's what a daily shiur that Daf Yomi is similar to. So that's how I developed. I developed from whatever I was into a person who had a romantic notion of yeshiva, had a romantic notion of Talmud Torah. I didn't think that my job was to clarify things, to say the best kedushin that had ever been said, but I thought that my job was to infect others with what I thought was the critical experience within Yahweh. Now, I would like to mention several people who helped me and who determined my path. The first person I would like to mention is Rabbi Mordechai Elton, who was the Rosh Yeshiva in Itri, where I spent a few years when I first came to Israel. It was a very interesting man, is a very interesting man, a little volatile, different, speaks his mind, and a few other things. Now, he decided that I would be in charge of a yeshiva, which didn't exist. Even though I told him that this is not the way I thought of my life, and that I was on the path to academia. But he insisted. He had a strong character, and he was able to convince me to do something that I never thought of doing, and that was to give shiur and Torah to university students in 1967. That's when I started doing that. So I thank you, Rabbi Elton, for two things. First, allowing me to learn the Yokola, which was a very extraordinary kollel at the time. I came from YU. At least I'll talk about my own shortcomings. When I got out of YU, I thought that if you thought that you could learn the Daf Gemara if it happened to come up, you were a Talmud Chacham. I'll try to say that again. Even though I had not yet learned the Daf Gemara, but I've never seen it, like some Daf Gemara and Avodah Zarah. I never saw it before. So I say, but I think that if it was something I had to do, I'd figure out what it was. That was my position on myself. When I came to Itri, I went to a room, it was a total room full of people, every one of whom knew Shas and full Chavopim of Shulchan Aruch. And it took me a while to figure out why they were all doing this. But I think I figured it out. So I thank Rabbi Elton for those two things, for letting me learn the Torah, and for pushing me in the direction that I eventually went. I'd like to mention Rabbi Shimon Felix. Rabbi Felix, I think he's here someplace. Rabbi Felix. He's not 40 years yet. He's too young for applause. But Rabbi Felix, Rabbi Felix is one of these guys to whom it never occurred that we might not be able to do it. This is something that occurs to me all the time. But it never occurred to him that we might not do it. And I would say that in some ways, he's responsible for the beginning of the yeshiva in Yeshivat Mitzvah. He pushed for it, he did it, and I'm grateful to him. Now, he also thinks that I don't know this, but I do know it. I'd like to mention Rabbi Yaakov Miller, J. Miller. Now, obviously, Jay was a meaningful person to the students he had, but he was also a very meaningful person to me. Because amongst all the things that I knew nothing about, education was very high up on the list. It never occurred to me that there was that much to know about it. I mean, I've gone to school all my life. I guess, average is better results. I mean, I went to a high school where the idolatry was getting high grades. That's if you got a high grade, you could even. You didn't get a high grade, then nobody was up to you. So that's, sort of a way of being. I didn't know anything about education. I didn't think that there's such a, I didn't even know there was such a thing as education. I was a math major. And then I studied Semitic languages, which of course is, good for people who don't want to study something that has nothing to do with anything. It's like almost being a hermit. You can go all over the world and find another 3 people who know what you're talking about. But they're also not interested. That's what I did. I didn't know anything about education. J. Miller knew a lot about education. He had ideas which to him were very clear. Fortunately, unfortunately, some of the ideas could only be carried out by him. Only he had the strength, the tenacity, and the mind which enabled him to do it the way he wanted to do it. And he insisted that you could take people who are post-college and who had never learned Torah and give them what it took to become like professional Torah learners. And he taught me this. He taught me this, and for that I am especially grateful. I'll tell you, Rabbi Miller is not well today, and we all wish him a refuah shlema, which is why he couldn't come today because he's not feeling particularly well. We wish him a refuah shlema. I'd like to mention Rabbi Kamenetsky. Rabbi Kamenetsky taught the highest shiur in the yeshiva for some time. Rabbi Kamenetsky is a person who I would describe as a lover of Torah. Not a lover of Torah in a kind of incidental way, but a lover of Torah in the most profound way. He's always in the middle of a conversation about Torah. He's always willing to join you in a conversation about Torah. So he helped me understand what it means to love the Torah. And I thank him for that. Finally, I would like to thank Rabbi David Ebner. Now, Rabbi David Ebner and I have a relationship that goes back not so much to when I was a student, even though we knew each other, but when I started the yeshiva in America, in Israel. Rabbi Ebner was the representative of the yeshiva in America. Eventually, he came to Eretz Yisrael and started working in the yeshiva. I have to admit that at the time that he started to work, I didn't really understand how a person who could combine Tells NYU and literature and sociology and a smattering of philosophy and the talent of presentation, how all of that could be combined such that each of the elements in that combination would remain authentic, important, significant. I think Rabbi Ebner taught me that a person can really be true to himself
that you don't have to be embarrassed, because at the end of the day, it's all part of the Torah. So I thank him. I thank him for that. When I left Adrian, it's like a biography. I don't know if it's an intellectual biography, or if it's an intelligent biography. It's a biography. When I left Adrian, I started my career in Adrian, Rabbi Elephant, right? Remember? It was because I was too Zionist, too academic to be in a real yeshiva, which is what the Itri yeshiva aspired to be. I also started teaching women Talmud, which was not held in high esteem by the people who were making a real yeshiva. They thought about it. Even though Rabbi Elephant, liked the fact that I could speak English, even though, from Brooklyn, I did it as well as I could. But they decided, the powers in the yeshiva, that I was too old to be retrained. Nevertheless, and I've told the story many times, that when I came to the Kollel, when I came to learn the Kollel, I had a Vespa, like a motorbike, and I used to show up. See, when I came to Israel, I thought I would end up in Merkas Arab. But I didn't. But I still retained the trappings. So I wore sandalim with no socks. I had no jacket, and I had a metal hat that went with my motorcycle. And I was in the Kollel. Came time to daven mincha. So I didn't think it would be appropriate for me to put on my metal hat. So I didn't. So they came over to me. I mean, like it's always a committee, charging something. So the committee, they said, "Loita, you can't daven mincha without socks, without a jacket, and without a hat." So I said, "Well, what should I do?" He said, "Look, you have to get dressed for mincha." I said, "Look, I can't do that. But I'll tell you what, pick one. One out of three. I'll do one out of three." So he said a jacket. So okay, so I got a jacket. I left it in the yeshiva, just like Rabbi. I got a jacket. I left the yeshiva, and that was okay for a while. But when the yeshiva started, that was the Kollel. The Kollel, you can get away with things. But yeshiva, you can't get away with anything. And since, as I said, I was too old to be retrained, I'm nevertheless grateful for the initial trust, and in time, over time, for my eldest son-in-law, who was a product of the yeshiva. So you have to understand, Yoshua, I'm responsible for your quality by leaving. Recently, there was a little event which caused or ended by my leaving the yeshiva. Because, in part, everything is complicated, and different people tell different stories. But, in part, I have beliefs and opinions that are different. I'm somewhat a Haredi, as you may have noticed. Too far to the left for the guys on the right, and too far to the right for the guys on the left. I like that. And I've been willing to put up with whatever that might imply. Anybody who follows politics in our time knows that it's difficult to be right all of the time. And most people vote for a traditional party or a default party. Thinking often seems a purposeless exercise. So I tell you all of this is an educational point that I've tried to stick to.
choose the way that seems most appropriate for you. And if it's within the confines of the halakha, I will surely support you. We, those who consider ourselves to be somewhat modern orthodox, are more and more inclined to follow the Haredi way and live in insular communities. I mean, communities in which everybody is more or less the same. This was not true when I came on Aliyah. It was not true. Mishhav, that the building company of the Polo Mizrahi, I guess it's not Mizrahi, I guess it's whatever it's called, Mishhav would never build a building in a religious neighborhood. They only build buildings in mixed neighborhoods. And this is Yerushalayim. And they said, we're going to build a building, and the building is going to have sukkah porches, and everybody will see, and this is going to have a tremendous effect on people at large. Today that's changed. Most buildings that are built for religious Jews, no matter what kind of religious Jews they think they are in neighborhoods where everybody is that kind of a religious Jew. And therefore, I think that we, in general, become more oppressive to those who are outside. It's sort of like, it's harder to get in. Because, I mean, imagine when I came to Israel, you went to Kiryat Moshe, which is where I live, and there were these kinds of people in the street, and those kinds of people in the street. So you walked in, you had a ponytail, and you were wearing shorts and the sandals, and so you'd feel like you were from a different world. Imagine coming to Matterstov. I mean, it's a hard thing to deal with. Everybody's black. So it's very hard to make the connection. So we have to work harder. We have to work harder because, after all, Klal Yisrael is our responsibility. They don't know that they're part of Klal Yisrael, but we do. And therefore, since we've chosen to be insular, we have to figure out ways to be more open and more inviting. And that's all I have to say about Kiruv, and that's all I know about Kiruv, actually. I would like to thank two people. They say that we're supposed to say something like there are no words, or I can't express, or I don't know. You know these books, Matthew? You put this page in a book where it says, to my wife, without whom I could not have, whatever, and then the rest of the page is blank. So I can always say, couldn't say anything about his wife in the whole page. The publisher would have printed it. Couldn't say a thing. I'd like to say thanks first to Rabbi Sachs. Now, Rabbi Sachs means a lot of different things to different people. But everybody who he comes into contact with is impressed by the quality of what he does. I cannot tell a lie. I had nothing to do with this evening. Nothing. Sometime along the way, Jeff told me that the venue had been changed to the Pninan Dan. But I think that's only because he wanted me to get there. But it wasn't because he thought that there was any importance in my knowing it. Because I wouldn't say that he has no respect for my administrative ability. I think it's more that he knows. So he just does it. But lest you think that what Rabbi Sachs does is organize dinners. This is not the case. The Atid Fellowship Program is his program. He chooses the candidates, he brings them, he teaches them, he arranges their syllabus, and they become, within a short period of time, able to recognize that he is a superior educator and thinker about education. When we went into this business of Atid some years ago, he knew what it would be. I did not know what it would be. And he has, fortunately for me, allowed me to keep on working and thinking about what it would be. So for all of this, I thank you, Rabbi Sachs. And I don't know where you are. The talent, the intelligence, and the competence, and being able to do it. No, Rabbi Sachs, he gets it on all those different levels. The second person I would like to actually be excused from thanking, because I will be guilty of what those guys who put that, inscription in the book are guilty of, is my wife, Mary. As I understand it, Miriam was Rabbi Sachs' assistant. And it works this way. Miriam gets up and calls Jeff on the phone and says, did you do this, did you do that, did you do the other thing? And what about this, and what about that, and what about the other thing, and the other thing? And of course, anything that had to be done was already done. And it was just that Jeff had to act in a position of counseling. Miriam did this in between the hours when she was counseling. So she figured she could be a patient. Although when she called up Jeff and she said, this is not the other thing. But she was concerned about it and worried about it and helped and brought in, all this information from my childhood years, which even I had no recollection of. But somehow it was all there. I also appreciate very much, the productions here, the CD which I saw but I have not heard, and the slideshow which I saw a little bit of but didn't really get to see properly. And again, I can only appreciate as much as I'm able the work that others did and the confidence with which they did this work. I'd like to end, and that's just like a chapter end. But you don't know how long the chapter is. No, it won't be a long chapter. I just like to end by saying, going back to the beginning, this is, to my mind, an evening that bespeaks a new beginning. And I'd like to tell you briefly, tell you what it is that I'm going to do. Not everything, but something. Something we're launching probably after Rosh Hashanah. A yeshiva, a whole yeshiva on the web. We're working now on the technology. Yeshiva, not a shiur, a yeshiva. People who are involved together in the enterprise of learning Torah, who are going to be checked, tested, and produce a particular result. The yeshiva that we built over the years in Yerushalayim will be developed on the web so that people who don't have the opportunity to come to Yerushalayim will be able to participate in Torah learning in a yeshiva. Of course, it's a lot more complicated than what I just said, but I'm sure that, we'll get it done. After that, of course, or maybe simultaneously, we'll start a yeshiva for women. And then finally, on the web, it's my intention to offer Torah learning to kids all over the world, on the high school level, who, as you know, not all high schools are able to, for whatever reason, to give the children a real kind of proper Torah learning program. And so that it seems to me that if it was done on the web, a lot of children, not all the children in all the schools, but some of the children in some of the schools will be able to take advantage of what is given and be able to get them up to the level where they could attend a better school in Yerushalayim. So this is what's happening, and this is what I'm doing in Mitzvah Hashem. And anybody who comes to the dinner in 40 years from now will be able to come for free.
My brother, friends, a couple of months ago we sent out an email, myself and Dr. Erica Brown in Washington, requesting thoughts, reminiscences, some essays, some reflections from former students, friends, colleagues of Rabbi Brovender over the last 40 years. Since we sent that email out, every day in our inboxes, my inbox, Dr. Brown, Dr. Erica Brown's inbox, Jeff Sachs' inbox, the letters just keep coming in. And we compile them together into the book which is in front of you on the table. And we'd like to present this evening, I'd like to present to Rabbi Brovender the coffee table version. The other version, Rabbi Sachs organizes for Miriam's handbag. Fits nicely, you can take it when you go on the plane. So this is the version, it's up to date, we even got our last email this morning. And I'd like to say if anyone after this evening's dinner would like to perhaps write something to Rabbi Brovender, his email appears in the handbag version, and you're welcome to do so, I'm sure it'll be warmly appreciated. I've read each piece in this book, Rabbi Brovender, and I'd like to say that this book has a dual nature because it means something to us, the Talmudim and friends, and it will mean something different, I think, to you. I can't speak on behalf of everyone who hasn't read it yet, but for me personally, reading these reflections, have you affected people over the last 40 years in your teaching career? Inspired, creates a feeling in us, I think, to do more and to be more. And there's a lot in the pieces which have been written which also teach us how we should be. But for you, Rabbi Brovender, I think what you'll find in these pages, more than just the honor and the respect and the admiration that people have for you. Two things. One is a tremendous joy at the opportunity of being able to say thank you. And the second thing you'll find in this book here is a tremendous amount of love for you from all your Talmudim in Britain to you, to express their appreciation, to express their love. And certainly I think I reflect everyone's feelings here tonight when I say that it's our hope that you feel the love and you feel the appreciation from everyone you've been involved with for so many years. And that love should lift you up on a wave and carry you forward together with Miriam, that we should be able to continue to enjoy from you for so many years to come more of what we've been able to enjoy over the past 40 years. So Be'ezus Hashem, we look forward, as you've spoken, you should go Mechail Chayil and continue to give so much to Klal Yisrael in the wonderful and unique and special way it is Rabbi Brovender. I invite everyone to enjoy the buffet.
Yerushalayim, Yerushalayim, Era Kodesh, Yerushalayim, Era Kodesh,